All right, so we are now in Bali, in a exotic location.
Indonesia, yes.
So we play against Maninang.
Yes.
Maninang. Okay.
Well, Maninang and Ardijanzak, the next game, were in that time the best players from Indonesia. This tournament, which was organized in a fantastic way in '82, was probably the best tournament ever organized in Indonesia, the strongest anyway. And it happened to be also the longest. I mean, it had 22 or 23 rounds, very long way. I mean, we played in 2 locations in Bali, in Denpasar and some other place. Okay, but it was also very beautiful. Bali is also, something exceptional for the tourists and so on. And it was very, very well organized. We had everything. I mean, we had even an earthquake, during the tournament there.
Really?
Well, finally nothing happened, but it was a little bit unpleasant, of course, yes. Okay, so coming back to our game, after e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4. Okay, taking there, takes, knight f6, knight c3, and d6. This position with d6 is the so-called Scheveningen variation for black, which gives the chance to come later on in any other variation from Sicilian, in Najdorf, in Richter-Rauser, or in the Paulsen also after a6, if you have time to play a6. Later on you have some, some normal position from Paulsen. But now after g4, this is a very sharp line, the so-called Keres attack against the Scheveningen, the move g4. And after h6...
You said Keres?
Keres was one of the legends of the chess world. I mean, a legendary grandmaster from Soviet Union. And he introduced this line for white with g4. Attacking immediately on the king's side. Later on was played successfully by Karpov in some very important games, and the majority of these games he could win, but the game is very unclear. It's not clear at all who is better in this line, with black. If black plays well, I mean, yes. The alternative was not to play immediately g5, but preparing with rook g1. This is the alternative, not g5 immediately, but okay, g5. I took it. Took with the bishop and knight c6. Queen d2, queen b6. We'll see. This is a very good move from strategical point of view. I wanted to see the difference because it was for us, for the good European chess players, it was very clear. The big majority of the Asian players played very well tactically, but they didn't succeed very well in these so-called strategic positions or strategic game. We'll see the difference immediately in our game here,
So they were looking for
Black is preparing the exchange of some pieces later on, and he tries to come in some better end game in the next moves. You see, if you arrive in a good end game later on as black, you have better chances, a very good chance to win. You see,
that was the strategy you were looking for.
The strategy, yes. The strategy is very, very important. Now the game is different because we have the computers. Now they are able to play very well in some strategic games also, But then, a long time ago, it was like this. The European and the American grandmasters played much better strategically, and the Asian players realized somehow from time to time very good tactical games, You could surprise anyone, they could surprise anyone. So now he didn't really understand the position, and he gave black the possibility to trade a few pieces later on, and we see why and how it's so important, So f4. Here, instead of f4, he had to play, in my opinion, knight b3. After knight b3, the game is very complicated, and the result most uncertain. It's not clear at all who is better. But black, anyway, has a good game, has normal position. After f4, after knight f4, knight takes d4, we'll arrive in some kind of endgame, as I told you before. So now if everything is forced, takes, and bishop d7, very good. Now e5 immediately was not good because you have bishop c6 and black is better already, And after bishop g2, bishop c6, the result of the opening is clear. Black has no problem at all, and he is preparing to have some better game in the few moves, Okay, rook d2. Now we played knight d7, f5. Okay, in my opinion, he had to play f5 because we are threatening already the move, very unpleasant move, f6, winning the bishop, If he didn't realize this, he was almost losing the bishop from g5, Yeah. So now we have time to come with this fantastic position for our knight on e5. Now black controls all the central squares and is clearly better, And we arrive later on in the endgame that I told you before. This is most important. So he takes in e6, we take in e6, knight e2, and bishop e7. Now, what to do? If you take in e7, black is clearly better. If you don't take in e7, you have some weaknesses, h2 and d4, clear advantage for black. So, okay, he took in e7, I took with the king, knight d4. Now the result of the opening is very clear. The knight from e5, is very powerful, and the resulting position is clear in black's favor, The pawn from h2 is weak. The pawn from g7 is already strong enough. We'll see in the next endgame that we'll have. So after knight d4, rook f8. He took in c6. I took with pawn. Now it's clear that we have also the absolute control of the center, and better knight against the weak bishop from f1. Because if he takes in a6, is even worse because he opens the position in black's favor on the queen side, That will happen in our game later on. So g5. This is a very important move for the next endgame. The endgame will be played on the king side, you see. Now the idea is very clear. We will attack the pawn from h2 in the next moves. We try to come with our pieces to attack the pawn from h2.
So why is not good?
He took in a6, I think, yes?
No, not yet.
Not yet. He played rook g2. Okay, he attacks the pawn. Now g4. Now he took in a6. And now we come back with our rook there and we recapture the pawn from a6, from a2. We have threatening position also on the queen side, very unpleasant for white. Now because we take, he has no time to take in g4 because he loses the rook.
Yes.
And if he plays king b1 after rook h a8, he can resign.
Yes.
Yeah. So the position is already very sad for white.
Yeah.
What can he do? He played rook f1 and knight f3. After knight f3, again, is a very unpleasant threat because he can't take in f3. If he takes in f3, rook a1 check,
Yes.
So what to do? The position is already lost because he loses by force the pawn from h2.
So it's almost a tactical win here.
Tactical win, but first of all, it was strategy. I told you before. White didn't realize the idea, from his opponent. And finally, he couldn't avoid such a position where he has no counterplay at all and he's lost probably in any position,
Yes.
By force, you see. And very simple. Now b3 probably is the only move. And now you have time to trade the rooks in f1, okay, and take the pawn from h2. Is enough to win, You have pawn up, better knight, control of the black squares. You come with the king through f6 e5 or f6 g5 until f4. And when you arrive with the king in f4, he can resign. So now, again, it's forced, but now it's very simple. Any good player would win this. Okay, you don't give the pawn. And as I told you before, you come with your king, knight f6, king f6, b4, king e5. Okay, king d3. Check. King f4. Now is enough. In any position, black is winning without any problem. So b5, you takes. Yeah, you don't give any counter chance, King has nothing to do on the queen side, because now after king c6, e5, again, complete control on the king side, complete control on the central squares, and you want to take the second pawn. Now, okay, finished, of course. So he played king d5, and after knight f3, did he play something, or he resigned?
Yes, no, he played c4.
Okay, and after c4, g3. As I told you before, c5. I mean, the only move. Now you take in c5, he takes in c5.
He resigned here.
He resigned because he has no counterplay at all. I mean, what to do? I mean, if he takes, for instance, in c5, the only move.
Yes.
Yeah. Rook h2 wins, knight h4 wins. Yeah. Both of them win immediately, Yeah. Okay, he resigned. But, as I told you before, he didn't realize very well what happens, you see, coming from the opening. It seems that the game was more or less even, but finally black was already better in any position. And by playing precisely, he could win without any problem, the difference was very clear. It was a small advantage, a bigger advantage, decisive advantage, like this, in a very simple way. Strategy.
Yeah. Interesting. Nice. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gheorghiu.